Current Affairs, great magazine, edited by Nathan Robinson. Everybody should be reading Current Affairs regularly. Tweets out, I wonder how @Neera Tanden will defend giving Charles Murray's think tank a giant pile of money. And you think to yourself, wait, what the hell does that mean? Charles Murray works for the American Enterprise Institute, far-right think tank. It's housed him and his work to socially and even genetically codify class and racial hierarchies. They work diligently on behalf of the U.S. corporate sector to stop any ability for even the most modest environmental or public health regulations. It's a extremist, far-right, any type of pernicious corporate oligarch interest. It's just a Republican think tank. It's precisely what you'd expect. And Center for American Progress obviously also takes a huge amount of corporate funding as well, and is very much in the corporate mainstream of the Democratic Party. But I don't believe in drawing false ideological equivalencies. They certainly represent something different on the ideological spectrum. They have actually sometimes some very good content.
The rank and file personnel is it's night and day,
yeah,
right?
It's night and day. And they've definitely done some very good work on climate, on civil rights, on even on foreign policy at times. So it's whatever one thinks of Center for American Progress, and certainly I'm well to the left of them, and I see the inherent contradictions of a progressive think tank funded by corporate money. They absolutely push a legitimately center-left-ish agenda versus a far-right extremist agenda. So why the hell would they be chipping off $200,000 to one of the most extreme think tanks in D.C.? And, of course, one of the most could just mean any Republican-aligned think tank. Well, and you saw up there, we had the info, and now let's go to the next tweet. This is Neera Tanden's response. We have a joint program on defending democracy from the rise of authoritarianism. Here's the press release from CAP website. I welcome @Current Affairs to cover the many papers we have jointly authored. This is a critical topic more media should focus on. Okay, sure. I would tend to agree because there actually is a global far-right authoritarianism that's rising. There's also a certain very real authoritarian tendency, in fact, of the third way politics of Emmanuel Macron, very quickly going to riot police, very quickly going to violently repressing anti-austerity protests, and also in general rushing through a whole new slew of legislation targeting immigrant populations and opposed to civil liberties. Also, we have this research that came out last year that was reported in the New York Times that say that centrists are actually the most skeptical of democracy across the Eurozone as well as Australia and New Zealand. So, yes, authoritarianism is a very important and dangerous issue from the United States to Hungary to Russia to India to the Philippines to Brazil to Israel. But what exactly do you think you're doing when you team up with a think tank like AEI, who, of course, would be filled with people, the descendants of Pinochet defenders and advisors?
Charles Murray.
And a guy like Charles Murray, who's literally best known for making a form of highly distorted scientific, quote-unquote scientific racism to be socially acceptable, whose entire work, both of natural and social science, is an attempt to justify class dominance and racial hierarchies. Current Affairs responds, when Neera and AEI and Charles Murray say democracy, they mean, quote unquote, they mean laissez-faire capitalism. And when they say authoritarianism, they mean minimum wage laws. The Europe report in your link, and here's the tell, classifies Jeremy Corbyn among the authoritarian populists. There have been certain criticisms of some of Jeremy Corbyn's rhetoric, which I've engaged in because I think that they represent not any type of actual problem, but legitimate stylistic concerns and questions which are a part of politics. If you could name a single policy that Jeremy Corbyn is advocating that could even be remotely construed as authoritarian, you should be paid millions of dollars, because it does not exist. In fact, the proposals of Corbyn and McDonnell would not only affirm UK democracy, they'd broaden it to include worker democracy and worker power in the forms of worker cooperatives. Actually, probably the greatest enhancement of democracy being proposed by a party in modern era. So that shows the cards there. Jeremy Corbyn as an authoritarian is a ridiculous smear. Now what we have here.
And these criticisms aren't just some sort of like post-Chapo Bernie bro thing, right? Like this is a Greg Sargent post from January 2015, where it's talking about Center for American Progress's donors. And there's this line that says, perhaps most notably, given CAP's advocacy for an economically progressive agenda, is that CAP's top donors include Walmart and Citigroup, each of which have given between $100,000 and $499,000. That's about a partnership with AEI worth. There are two of them.
Indeed.
Other donors to CAP, a leading advocate of healthcare reform, include the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, which represents leading biotech and biopharma firms, and Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, both of which gave up to $49,000. And Nira said, "We're proud of our donors." She said in an interview, "We're very diversified. We have a very low percentage of corporate donors. We have a wide panoply of individuals and foundation supporters. Given that transparency is a progressive value, we wanted to get our list out there."
Good for them. I appreciate the transparency. But there is obviously a huge internal contradiction between advocating, again, even a modest center-left agenda, and accepting money from corporate cartels that are fundamentally opposed to them. Can someone print me the story, because we should transition to it, about the AstroTurf campaign getting staffed up with Clinton and Obama people to destroy Medicare for all? We'll go to that in a second. But first, I just want to take this opportunity to point people to the People's Policy Project, which is Matt Brunig's project. It's basically a grassroots, bottom-up think tank for the people that advocates
CAP.
Yeah, replace CAP with PPP, the People's Policy Project. Actual policies for Medicare for all, a carbon tax, which would work in a progressive way. It's a tax and dividend scheme, tackling inequality through social ownership of capital. This is the serious stuff. These are the real policies that will address serious issues. Then, of course, there's Data for Progress, which is, I think, Sean McElway's group. And they're working on the core issues of Medicare for all, abolishing ICE, and I think also the Green New Deal. And they're providing the sort of polling and political strategy so that people running on state, local, municipal, and national levels can have a fully fleshed out and for real, no bullshit progressive agenda. So when you're looking forward for building the future, and that's the context, by the way, on which the entire party turns, is the funding and intellectual and strategic infrastructure of actual progressive groups with real policy coherence, because they aren't undermined by either just sort of incestuous networks and sort of cognitive capture, or just straight up raw corporate influence from, Walmart and Citicorp are some of the most damaging and dangerous corporations on the globe.
Yeah, and it's basically sort of like the left needs... Think tanks did a lot of work for conservatives in the past 40 years, right? Like this is how this bullshit this is how the Overton window has been stretched. It's by like, look at us, we're just following this methodology, and actually, maybe we should rethink child labor laws.
Exactly. Well, we're just taking the science where it finds us. I mean, that built that gremlin Charles Murray's entire career. Read Matt Iglesias' great piece on him as a successful policy entrepreneur.